Hello everybody, I'm Tuppence. I have got this really cute little gnome jar. I guess it could also be a Santa, which is what actually I'm going to make it as. So the main part of the jar is the body, and then you've got a little lid which is going to be the hat. I'm going to make this out of Aqua Cast because I want to use this for a candle jar, and because I've never used this before, I need to measure it first to find out how much I'm going to need. So I'm going to place it on top of the scales, and I'm going to set them at grams and make sure that it is zeroed, and that will be zeroed when I turn that on. So now I just need to fill this up with water, and I'm looking to find out how many grams of water it holds. Now grams is equivalent to milliliters, so that will give me its volume as well. So it's 158, I'll round it up a little bit. And now I need to do the same with the lid. So I'm just going to scoop out a little bit of this water, because if I try and pick this up now, I'm going to squeeze that mould. It's going to make a big mess all over my desk. Just need to take out a little bit and lower that water level. And then I can carefully pick this up and pour that back into the jug. Now I can repeat this process with the lid. Just make sure that I zero the scales before I start filling it up with water. Okay, so I had 159 from the body, so I'm going to round that up to 160, and 85 from the lid. So that is 245 altogether. So again, I just need to empty this back into the jug, and then I'm going to need to clean these out before I can use them. So there'll be lots of little water droplets in there, and they could cause bubbles in the Aqua Cast. So I'm just going to take a paper towel, and especially in this one, that little peak on the top of the cap, it kind of curls over. So I just want to make sure that there's no water hiding in there. And I'll just dab the mould. Try not to brush the mould with the towel, because even that can cause scratches. I'm going to do the same to the other pot as well. Alright, now I'm on the Elechem website. I'm going to choose water-based eco resins from the drop down, and I'll choose the second image, that's the Aqua Cast. And if I scroll down the page, you'll see the calculator. And where it says mould volume, I'm going to add up my lid and my base, and I'm going to put in 252, which is a rounded up version of what I got. That tells me it is 334 and 119, and again I'll round those up, so I'll put 335 powder and 120 water. I've got my empty cup on the scales and I'm zeroing that, and now I can add 335 of my powder. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to set that aside, and now I can measure out my water. Again, I've got my cup on the scale and it's zeroed, and I'm using a slightly bigger cup because I like to add the powder to the water rather than the water to the powder. So I'm just going to fill this up to 120. It's gone a little bit over, and that is fine. You have a little bit of leeway. It will just mean that it'll be slightly more fluid, and it may take a little longer to cure, but really 3 milligrams is not going to make any difference. Alright, so now I can tip my powder in. I'm going to pour it in a little bit at a time, so I'll just make a spout, and I'm going to make sure that I mix this in thoroughly and that I don't have any lumps. So if you do it a little bit at a time, it just gives it time to adjust rather than just getting one big clump at the bottom of the cup. This is also why I like to pour the powder into the water. It kind of sifts through the water rather than just being a clump at the bottom. Alright, so I'm just going to mix this up. Just got the last bit to do now, and you can see that I am scraping along the edge of the cup and making sure that I squash any lumps that might be in there against the edge of the cup. There's also quite a lot of dry powder sticking to my stick, so I'm going to have to scrape that off as well. But it's all mixed in pretty nicely. Scrape that off. And a last couple of mixes. You don't really want to stir it as fast as I am. You get quite a lot of bubbles, but because I've got a little bit more liquid in there, it should be fine. So it's kind of like a watery milkshake or single cream. I don't know what you call it in the States. I think it's half and half, but yeah. Alright, let's tap this up and down. That'll help bring up any bubbles, and then if there is any loose powder in there, hopefully that will float to the surface and I'll be able to see it. But it's looking good so far. So let me move that out of the way and grab my moulds. Right, I'm going to start with this. And because it's got that little curve at the bottom, I'm going to put a tiny bit in there, and then I'm going to squeeze that. Make sure that I push out any bubbles that might be trapped there. And I'm going to fill this up. This is pretty flimsy as moulds go, so I do need to be careful that I don't knock this over. It hasn't got very strong supports, and there's quite a severe lip all the way round, so you're going to have to make sure that you check for any bubbles underneath that. So I'm going to fill that up and then gently squeeze along that lip, pull it apart, kind of roll it back, let the bubbles out. It literally is like a right angle, so anything is going to get stuck underneath that ledge. You know, you want to do your best to make sure that you get it out, which is why I made this a little bit more liquid than normal. Alright, let me move that over a tiny bit. Just try and push it over there, and then I can bring this mould forward and start to fill up this one. Again, I'll part fill it and give it a tap and squeeze to make sure there are no bubbles, especially up round by his nose, otherwise it's going to look like he's got spots. Then I can just fill up the mould, add a little bit more to the hat. Now I'm going to tap the table so that they level out. And I'll tap the moulds just for a little bit so that they release any bubbles. And you can see it's pretty accurate. Don't have very much left in my cup. So now I need to leave these to dry, and I'll be back for demould. Okay, these have been curing for several hours, so now I can demould them. And it's not quite as easy to demould Aqua Cast as it is resin because it's not quite as slippery. But these moulds are super supple. They're meant for candles. So I just need to fold them back. And this should come out pretty easy because it is cone shaped. Wow, that came off super easy. Not bad. It looks very smooth. I've got a little bubble there just underneath that curve, and I've got some around the edges, but not too bad. Generally pretty good. So that needs to dry for a little bit longer. Let's try and get this one out as well. This one might be a little harder, but the mould is very soft. So again, just roll it back. Oh, that's coming out really easy. Looking good. Just twist that middle out. And there we go. Yeah, that looks great. Don't have any bubbles around the top. Have got some just around the bottom, little micro bubbles, and one in his beard, but that's pretty good. Okay, fold the mould back in straight away, and let's see how this fits. Oh, not bad. There is a little bit of an overhang on the moustache, but it looks pretty good. That is cute though. Very cute. Little bit wobbly. I love it though. That's going to be really nice when it's painted up and got the candle in. My only issue is that that's quite deep, so I don't know how deep I can actually make my candle. Might try and hollow that out, I think, but we'll see. I'm going to paint mine as a Santa, but before I can do that, I'm going to have to leave these to dry completely, and that's going to take at least 24 hours. So it's pretty sunny here at the moment. I'll pop them in the sunshine, and once these are dry, I'm going to paint them, and then I'm going to fill them with a candle. So I'm using these scented night lights, and I'm going to melt them. It already has the scent, the colour in, and the wax, so I'll melt them and I'll just create my own candle from that. So I'll be back when they're dry and I'm ready to paint them. Okay, these are all dry now and they're going to be ready for painting. I've got a little bit of red paint mixed up, but before I do that, I need to try and make this a little bit deeper. This sits quite deep in the mould, which means that I can't pour a very deep candle, and the wick will hit this. So I want to try and carve out the centre of this, just make a hole that the wick could sit in. So I've got this kind of scraper tool. I don't really know what it is. I think it came with a set of screwdrivers and it's for like prizing things out. But anyway, I'm going to use this. I'm just going to define this area by scraping away some of the Aqua Cast. So these have been drying for, well, over 24 hours actually. So they are pretty set. They're about as set as they can get, but I'm still able to sort of carve it out and scrape away the surface. I've got an electric file and I'm going to use that in a couple of minutes. This is going to take some time, so I will speed it up and I will show you a little bit of what I'm doing, but most of it I will do off camera. This did take a little while to complete. The easiest tool I found to use was a dental tool with a little spoon on the end. Once I've removed everything I wanted, I used some sandpaper to smooth out the surface, which left me with a pile of dust. So I'm going to use that and some bookbinding glue to create a kind of paste that I can fill in those holes, especially this one underneath here because that's the one that's going to be most visible. So bookbinding glue is acid free, it's extremely strong and durable, and it's the perfect thing to use for something like this or any kind of paper crafts. It's really durable, it's strong, and it dries really quickly within about 15 minutes. So I've mixed up a kind of putty with the glue and the dust, and then I've just spread that into the holes and filled it. I'm going to slightly overfill that and then I'll leave that to dry and I can sand it all flat afterwards. I'm also going to go around the bottom edge and fill in any of the major holes that are along there too. I'm going to do the same on the body, and once it's all dry I'll sand it nice and smooth. Okay, it is dry now so I can paint it. I'm going to use this chalk paint. It's a matte chalk paint by Cosmic Shimmer and it's called Jasmine. So it looks a little yellow or creamy in this bottle, but once it dries it tends to be the perfect flesh colour. So I'm just going to be doing painting now, and there's not much I can tell you about that. I'm going to pop on some music and you can watch me paint Santa.
In the quiet of December, when the night is crisp and clear, there's a jolly man who wanders, spreading warmth and Christmas cheer. In a bright red suit that sparkles like the candles in the snow, he brings magic to the darkness with a gentle glowing glow. Through frosted panes and sleeping towns, his sleigh bells ring so sweet. A whispered laugh, a snowy path, the sound of dancing feet. Oh, Santa, Santa, shine in the night, with a heart so full of kindness and his eyes so full of light. In the cold and quiet winter, when the world is tucked in tight, he lifts our spirits high again. Santa's magic makes the season bright. With a beard as white as moonlight and a smile warm as the sun, he reminds us in the darkest times that joy is never done. Every gift he leaves behind us is a promise wrapped in red, that love can chase the shadows from the places we may dread. Across the rooftops, calmly gliding, snowflakes swirling in his wake, he fills the air with hope and wonder, a dream for all to take. Oh, Santa, Santa, shining in the night, with a heart so full of kindness and his eyes so full of light. In the cold and quiet winter, when the world is tucked in tight, he lifts our spirits high again. Santa's magic makes the season bright.
Okay, nearly finished with the painting. I'm just using some acrylic gesso primer to cover up some of the smudges and marks that I got on the beard. I had a little bit of red down here that I didn't want. I will be painting some pearlescent varnish on top of this beard just to give it a bit of shine, but I need to wait for my special sealer to come. You're going to need to use a heat resistant sealer on this. You don't just use anything on a pot that you want to use for a candle. Alright, so that is looking pretty good. I'm going to set this aside and let that dry, and then I want to add a little bit more decoration to the hat. I've got a white acrylic paint pen and I'm going to draw on some simple snowflakes, just doodling on the hat. I'm not very good at doing things randomly, but I'll try and put a pattern on here. You don't have to do anything too complicated, it's just a series of crosses and lines, trying to use 3 lines altogether so it gives 6 arms. That's not looking too bad. I think I might need a couple more just down here. And then I need to leave this to dry. Okay, that is all dry now, and I can use this acrylic varnish to seal around the outside, but for the inside of the pot I need this special varnish. It's from Sculpd and it is a glossy candle varnish. It's heat resistant and it won't give off any toxic fumes when you're burning the candle, and I'm going to use this to seal the inside of the pot. So first of all I'm just going to do the outside, and because this is an acrylic varnish, it is water-based, and I like to just use my fingers to apply this, and then I can wash my hands afterwards, and yeah, it's just much easier. So I'm going to coat the outside of the hat and the Santa, and then I'll use a brush to apply that varnish on the inside of the pot, and everything needs a couple of coats. The outside isn't completely dry yet, but I can put this in the middle. There's no real instructions, there's nothing actually on the bottle, and I couldn't find anything much on the website, so I'm just going to apply this in a couple of thin coats, and I'll see just how quickly this actually dries. I am wearing gloves just in case, because there is some information on the outside of the packet about potential irritation to your skin and not to get it on your skin. So I've got gloves on and I'm just using the brush. I'm going to give it a couple of thin coats and I'll leave it in between a couple of hours just to make sure that it is completely dry. Then I can move on to the next step, which will be melting my candles and filling the pot. Okay, this has had 2 coats of varnish and so has the body, but I haven't done the beard just yet. I'm going to do that with an iridescent varnish, but I'll leave that till last. But next I want to put my wick in place, and I have got a wooden wick. It crackles like a fireplace when you light it. So I'm just going to put that in the middle, and then I can put the lid on and see if I need to cut that down a little bit more. And I do, because my lid is rocking about. So I'm just going to snip the top off of this with the scissors. This was one long wick and I cut it in half, and I've got both pieces in that base. Right, so now I can put the lid back on, and that is a much better fit, so I now know how long I need the wick to be and how high I can fill up my wax. Right, I'm going to glue that down with a little bit of hot glue. I'm just waiting for the gun to heat up, and I'm also going to turn this on and get this heating up as well. This is called a melt pot and it comes from Ranger, and it's used to heat anything from, well, beeswax, or you can use it for ultra embossing powder. I'm going to use it to melt the wax candles. So it's going to take a few minutes for this to warm up, but in the meantime I'm going to take the candles out of their cups and remove the wicks. And I'm going to start by putting 3 of them in here, because I don't know how much each one is going to make or how much I'm going to need for this pot. Also, this is quite a shallow dish, so I don't want to overwhelm the dish and flood the area. Okay, this one doesn't really want to come out of this cup. Try and push it from the bottom, and it looks like this one is pretty well glued in. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this foil cup with a pair of scissors. I don't really need them anyway. So these just need to melt. I've got this on about 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and it comes with a little lid, so I'm going to pop that on, and that should help them to melt much quicker. Right, looks like my glue gun is ready, so I'm going to glue this in place, and then that can cool down and set while I'm waiting for those candles. Just try and make sure I get it in the middle, or as close to as possible. Okay, that's got good space all the way around it, so that's fine. As soon as the wax is melted, I can pour it into the pot. And unfortunately, I made a pig's ear of it, and as you can see, I've got mess all over my table and down the side of the pot. So I'm going to try and wipe that away, but it is already setting. It's not a worry. I can scrape off as much as I can with my nail, and then I can clean that up later just using a hairdryer or a heat gun to warm up the wax and then wipe it away. I've melted a couple of more candles, and I'm just going to top this up to about 1/2 centimetre below the top of the wick. Now, once this cools down, this may well shrink and you'll get a dip in the middle, so I'm going to save this little bit. I'm just going to turn this off, and I might need to use that a little bit later. Once this has cooled down, if I have a dip, I can just reheat that and then I will pour that into the middle. But you can also use a hairdryer or a heat gun to just tidy things up at the end, and I'll show you that once this has cooled down. Okay, this is mostly set, but I just want to tidy this up a little bit. So I've scraped off most of that excess wax. And now I'm going to heat this up with my heat gun. You can see it melting on the surface. Well, I can see it melting on the surface. And then I'm just going to take a paper towel and wipe that off. I can get rid of any of the marks that are on there. And it's a bit like waxing the piece anyway. You just polish that in. So there we go, nice and smooth and shiny. And I can also use the heat gun to remove the bits that have gone up the side of the pot on the inside and just flatten that out a little bit. So I'm just going to wipe off this rim around here, and then I'm going to heat this up so that it melts, at least the surface melts, and it should pool in the middle and then lay flat. And then I can decide if I need to add any more and top this up. And this is what it looks like when it all cools down. You can see it is much neater around the outside and it's nice and flat. Now you can make it even flatter than that, but I'm happy with that. So now all that's left is for me to give him a sparkly beard, and I'm going to use this Meyspring Dazzling Diamonds. It's a kind of cross between a mica and a glitter. And I'm going to mix that in with my acrylic varnish. So I'm just going to put a little bit in this pot. And I can use that to paint the beard and his hair all the way around. Just give it a little bit of sparkle. So a couple of scoops will be enough. Get that lid screwed on tight, and then I can mix that in. Lovely. I'm going to apply this with a nice soft brush, and then he'll end up with a pearlescent sparkly beard.
Paints the sky.
Okay, he's all nice and dry and pretty much finished. I just have one more thing to do. The wax is all nice and flat. There is a little wax on the wick, but that's fine. That will just melt as soon as you set flame to it. But the sides are all nice and clean. I just need to put this cork on the bottom. So it's a self-adhesive cork. I think it really helps to finish a project off. It looks very professional, and it also helps to protect whatever surface you're going to put it on, especially when you're going to do something like a candle, which is going to get pretty warm on the inside. So the little hat sits snugly on his head, and I'm really glad that I hollowed this piece out to give me a little bit more room and to fit some more wax in there and a slightly deeper candle. So here he is, all done. I'm going to take some photos of this at the end, but if you've liked this project, I would really appreciate if you would give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. If you can share it, that's fantastic, and subscribe if you haven't. It really helps my channel, and you'll be able to find out what I'm going to make next time. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.
In the quiet of December, when the night is crisp and clear, there's a jolly man who wanders, spreading warmth and Christmas cheer. In a bright red suit that sparkles like the candles in the snow, he brings magic to the darkness.